It was just so uplifting.
It was fun.
Colourful.
We didn't have much, but we were really happy.
One of the best parties of the year.
Mate, I was mad excited.
You had generations coming in at different times. The crowd was going, the vibes was nice, the music was right.
Just before 6 o'clock this morning, the singing and dancing gave way to panic.
Children have been burnt.
We didn't feel that Britain owned that tragedy. We did not matter.
The new Crossfire became an us and them affair.
It felt, because I was born here, I'm not wanted.
The black community cannot just stand by and allow this to happen.
People started saying, we're going to have to do something.
We had the power and we were able to mobilize.
It was one of the proudest moments in our lives.
This is the beginning, not the end.
A pioneering 3-part documentary, Uprising.
Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association, and we are very pleased to have our 2021 Game Changer Award winner, Mr. Steve McQueen, as our special guest today to talk about all of his amazing projects. We're going to kick things off by introducing you to our members who are taking part in our roundtable, beginning with Nancy Green in Los Angeles, Albert McGee in South Florida, Sharonda Williams in Atlanta, Ruben Regaud in Miami, and Carolyn Hines in Toronto, and Rhonda Rasha Penrice in Atlanta. I'm going to let you guys do what you do so well, and I will see you on the other side.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. I'm Carolyn for Carolyn Talks podcast. And first of all, I have to thank you for these films and for the film, especially Education. That one touched me a lot personally. Because I'm dyslexic and I'm also Barbadian, so that there was a lot of the connections that I really related to. So my question has actually to do with Education, the film, and then also the documentary Subnormal, directed by Latanya Shannon. Could you just tell me the challenges that you and your team faced when creating the films, the Small Acts films, and then covering the same topics in documentary format for Subnormal and then Uprising and the other films? Could you tell me what were the challenges and what made it easier to have the stories be similar?
The challenges, well, I think it was just the research. I think that's the main thing really, and digging into the past, the recent past, and getting people to talk. I never forget being in a taxi with a gentleman and to having a conversation with him, as I always do with taxi drivers. And in emerging that this gentleman had gone to a subnormal school. And I mentioned it to him. I said, so you went to a subnormal school? And it's almost like he shuddered. It was almost like he heard these words that he hadn't heard for 35 years. And it was a lot of shame involved in what was going on then. To sort of, as far as Subnormal is concerned, and other things over the course of the series documentaries and Small Acts, it was about unearthing, but with care, and to get people to talk. That was the main thing, because again, it was there, but there was a sense that sometimes people didn't want to talk or, to find these things. And sometimes these things were in plain sight, but at the same time, people were blinded to them. And that's what we had to be reminded, that this is wrong. You know what I mean? Look at it again. This is wrong. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, I could go on forever about that with this question and my answer, but I think that personal sort of encounter was very, it was very sort of profound for me.
Yeah, I could see the difficulty, and I myself had challenges with that because I went to a special school back home too. They put me separate from the other kids at primary school in Barbados. So I fully understood and relate to that, and I could see where they were coming from. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Hi, Nancy Green with Film Critique. And hi, I want to thank you also for these projects. For me, Subnormal was actually also very personal. I didn't know that things like that happened in other places. For me personally, I grew up briefly, like my early childhood years in the South, and I was put into a special school. And they did that with a lot of the Black students in my school at the time, in my elementary school, like one by one, they were sent away to different places. And I was put into a school where there were people with mental disabilities and things like that, and other challenges, behavioral. And we were told that we could go back to our normal school if we got enough gold stars. And gold stars meant you couldn't complain about anything. If anyone bullied you, you weren't allowed to say anything. If anything went wrong, you weren't allowed to say anything. Basically, you had to be very silent and just do whatever they told you. And if you got enough gold stars, you'd get to go back to your school. I noticed that very rarely, like as an adult thinking back on it, very rarely the Black students were allowed to go back to their schools. Only occasionally, maybe, you know, one or two of the other white students. There were very few white students, except for people with like severe behavior problems or mental disabilities. And luckily I was saved from that, because that was at a different time, and I went to live with different parents. And so, you know, I didn't know that there were so many Black people that went through this, you know, and seeing this and seeing what that does to people, I found it so profound. And I wanted to know what made you tackle this particular topic, especially with subnormal.
Well, I'm dyslexic, and I didn't go to a special school. The reason why I didn't go to a special school, because it was Black parents and the Black Teachers Association, which basically got it demolished. I went to school in the 80s, so I went to high school in 82, 83. But before that, prior to that, a few years before, you know, Black children were just being sort of, transported to these schools. And it was only because of the Black Parents Association and the Black Teachers Association that this actually stopped, because they put so much pressure on the government, and basically they're my heroes. They're heroes that stopped this from happening. So yeah, it was kind of personal to me also, absolutely. And you know, a lot of those scenes in the film in education are actually real scenes, like the guy playing in House of Rising Sun. Oh yeah, I mean we became his audience for his sort of whatever. He's sort of people standing in front of him with a hairbrush. He did it in front of us. Anyway, but it's kind of interesting, because what's so interesting about your story as well is that it takes sometimes films or other people saying what they've gone through for people to face their own unfortunate recent history. And I think it's only can benefit us to talk about these things, and we could finally heal, because we do carry these things with us. And what for me about education and subnormal, what I wanted to talk about a lot, especially in education, were how we as a people turned it around. I would have definitely gone to subnormal school, but I did not, because of those people who basically, there's mothers and fathers and teachers who just said no. So yeah. Well, and thank you for sharing your story. It's very beautiful. Thank you for being so brave.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your projects.
Well, you just touched me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Steve. I'm Al McGee with YEticket.com. And man, really great to talk to you. You're a great storyteller and a filmmaker. Now, I want to talk about your 3-part documentary, Uprising. That really touched me because, for one, as an American, Black American, I never heard about this before at all. This happened in the 80s. I didn't know anything like this was going on over there in London. And I've been to London twice, but I did not realize there was a large Black community there in London. You know, everything is geared towards tourism and things like that there in London. And also, when the people protested in the 80s, I noticed that they did not have any backup like we have here in America for African Americans, like the NAACP, even the 14th Amendment and things like that. And they didn't have anything except for their own self-contained groups that they created to help themselves. And then it spread to more and more people there when they were protesting there in the 80s about the fire that happened that killed 13 young Black people.
We had our own groups. Definitely, we had our own groups. You know, I just mentioned two of them. I mean, you know, there's no real difference to the
right.
groups you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. But see, we have our groups that's on a national level, and your groups, the groups there at the time, just seemed to be on a local level.
No, they were national. No, they were national too. They were national.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but they're just a smaller country than yours. That's all.
Yeah. I noticed that. I said, but the people there, they stood together no matter what. Can you explain that? And also, you went to high school in 82, 83, when this happened, when this was going on. I know it touched you personally, but man, how much did it really touch you? And also, tell me a little bit more about the people there when it happened.
Well, it happened in 81, so I wasn't in high school then, I was 11 years old. But it did have an effect on me because, you know, the atmosphere. You felt it in the classroom, you felt it at work, you felt it in my parents coming back from work, you felt it in your family. And also everyone knew someone who knew someone, especially in London, because that's where we were. Everyone who knew someone or were associated with it. So it had a kind of a close sort of effect, a very, you know, it was tangible. It was in the air, it was in the atmosphere. What's the second part of your question? I'm sorry, hopefully I've answered as much as I can, but I can't remember all of your question. I apologize.
Oh, well, the people you were interviewing, say like Sandra Riddick and Denise Gooding and other people like that, they seem to still have a hurt, a pain from that, and it still seemed to be affecting them.
Oh, of course. I mean, how could it not? I mean, they went to a party and they came out of this situation with a memory, an unfortunate, tragic memory that lasted the rest of their lives when they lost friends. So, I mean, yeah, there's a continued pain because, of course, with the two sort of, the trials which are sort of never completed, you know, the sort of situation where they never got any sense of justice, and that they were themselves were blamed. So there's this sort of weight, which, you know, is with them. I mean, I'll be honest with you, this documentary is as much light as they've ever had, because for the first time they could speak for themselves. No one was prompting them, no one was telling what to say. They had the platform to say what they wanted to say. And it's the first time since the 40 years ago they've had that. So, you know, myself and James and the other guys and the editors and what we could do for them, we did. So yeah, it's kind of funny. It's the limits of art and the possibilities of art. So there you have it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and please keep up the good work. I'm a huge fan of yours.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Very kind. And also, I'll just say, I'd add one more thing about sort of, you know, people. I think often in America there's a limitation of curiosity in some ways. You know, the fact that, you know, unfortunately, you only knew there were people in London, Black people in London. There's Black people all over Europe, other places. I think what we are part of a diaspora. And that's very important. We tend to sort of get tucked and tidied up and focus on this national stuff, where we have to open our eyes and look beyond our national borders. Similar to Malcolm X, similar to Paul Robeson, similar to other artists, other people, other activists who saw beyond their borders. And in a way, what they did by doing that, they turned the telescope on themselves and said, "Look, I am a participant in the world, not just about this one place." And all those people I spoke about were totally transformed.
Yes, they were. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Steve. My name is Ruben from Cocalecas.net. I live in Miami.
I see.
One of the things that I love about your movies is the way you use music. And in Uprising, you use it as a major component to tell your stories. How important and how you choose these songs to play a major role in this film?
Well, one of the major parts of the film was Bob Marley. His emergence on the scene, I think in 73, but it was the first time anyone saw him in live. I mean, as a performer in Old Grey Whistle Test. I think his journey in music was in some ways parallel to the journey in the film, because what we had, a situation we had before the fire, life in the UK, and what was going on, and then we had the fire, and then we have the after effects. And I think, interestingly, of course, we know that Bob died in '81, the same time as the incident in the fire. So it had this sort of, how can I say, it had this sort of a mapping almost of his emergence and his death to the fire. So somehow I wanted to align those two things together, as well as other songs as well, other reggae tunes, because I honestly think Rastafarianism in the UK was so important, because if it didn't have, if young people didn't have that, I think there would have been a deep psychosis. I think if people didn't have that thing to hold on to of Rastafarianism, I don't know what would happen to the young people, honestly.
Thank you. I love all your movies, bro. All
Thank
of
you.
them.
Thank you.
Hi, Sharona Williams from Hair Weight. You know, I thought it was really important in how you showed how the media portray, you know, people from other communities that are not seen as white. And I really wanted you to speak to the importance of not only having everyone be able to tell their story, but also to making sure that you are showing that we are all human, because I think that's something that the media just fails to realize. And I wanted for you to speak more about the importance of that and the importance of being able to share our stories and tell our truth.
I think the media has been a culprit, has been a brute, has been, you know, when I was looking back at those papers and looking at the headlines and seeing those articles, I remember reading, my father he always used to buy the Daily Mirror. The Daily Mirror was a kind of like a socialist newspaper. And, you know, even in that newspaper, Black people were portrayed as a certain type. And we had we had our own newspapers, of course. We had The Voice, we had The Nation, we had other papers to counter that. But the things which were in the national press, it was horrific. Looking back now, it's shameful. Even then, it was shameful. But I think that is another story. That's another documentary possibly, because when you get in deeper into it, you see that people knew what they were printing. They knew what they were saying, but they said it anyway. And if anything, as an example to what you just talked about, I mean, when people were walking down Fleet Street in UK, that's when they was marching through. Fleet Street, of course, is like, I don't know what's the equivalent in say New York or other big cities where the newsprint, the presses were. In England, we had on Fleet Street, all the newspapers were next to each other, or the offices, and the March of the Union marchers walked down there, and people were spitting at them. People were calling them names, you know, and spitting at them. So that's another kind of conversation to be had. But what can I say? The media, that's another documentary possibly, because that's you could really get into it. I hope that answers your question. I didn't go on too long.
I know you did, and I'm going to manifest that media documentary because it needs to happen.
Yeah, good. Go for it. Okay.
Hi, it's Rhonda. I am curious about what about now makes this a time to release these stories on a bigger scale. Like some of the stories I've seen in indie docs, but you know, in the way in which you're telling these stories, it's never been on such a big platform. So what about the industry, or what about the climate in the UK and, you know, frankly, around the world has changed that these stories can be
told? So many things. I mean, you know, again, I think 12 Years a Slave has something to do with that, because I remember, and I've spoken about this before, when I made it, people were saying to me, you know, you're an impossible movie, and that movies with Black people in the leads won't do anything internationally. Might do something in America, but that was it, nothing else. I think 12 Years a Slave shattered that. And then people thought, oh, wow, we can make money out of this. So therefore, that's what happened afterwards. A lot of films happened after that. You know, not to say that there weren't films, say Denzel Washington and others who weren't doing well, of course, in those films, but they weren't stories about Black lives. More to do with action movies or something like that. And Denzel maybe was the only person, or maybe if there was another one, it was never about a Black theme. So I think once 12 Years a Slave, and I think also something about slavery, so dark as such, in our history, did so well financially. I think that opened a lot of doors, and also the times. The times change. I remember, the year before, the year after 12 Years a Slave was Oscar So White. The tank was broken. We broke something. We did something with that movie, not just with the movie itself, but we broke down some doors. And then when people want to go back to normal, people say, no, we're not going to go back to normal. I think that. I think also people want stuff. People are fed up. People are curious. People want stuff, and I think but to be honest with you, once things make money, that's when people start thinking about, okay, maybe there's a possibility for these things to sort of exist. Unfortunately.
Well, thank you. You're doing well.
Well, thank you. Very kind. But yeah, unfortunately, money talks, huh? Never mind.
Hi, I'm Carolyn again. So I want to ask you about the reaction of the diaspora, because as I mentioned before, I'm Barbadian. So watching the Uprising films in particular, like Ina Gooding and her family, they're of Bajan descent. And what was the reaction to other members of the diaspora, of the West Indian diaspora, when they saw not only the Small Axe films, but anyone that you spoke to about these documentaries, because they haven't been released yet, but what has been the reaction to them? Because I remember hearing things about Brixton and hearing these same reggae songs about Brixton playing back home in Barbados. So what has been the reaction across the diaspora from what you know?
Well, my diaspora is America. My diaspora is Africa. My diaspora is South America. My diaspora is West Indian. So I don't want to partitionize, okay, West Indian people. I don't, unfortunately, that's not, I don't like that. And then other people just rubbing hands, being very happy because of it. No, it's us. We come from one place, and we were unfortunately dispersed to others, and never mind. So within the diaspora, within all of our reactions, it's been pretty, it's been pretty. Well, in the UK, it's what's interesting about this whole thing is when children, their parents, and grandchildren sit down and watch something. All three generations sit down and talk about it, and then they see it, and then afterwards they talk about it. Afterwards, same thing happened with Small Axe. That was so fascinating for me, because to hear that the families are looking at this and having these discussions, like, Mummy, did that happen? Daddy, did that happen? Granny did that? Granddad, to hear, cousins and having that kind of conversation, friends from different, and also for their parents to say to their children, look, this is what happened. This is, and the children go, Mum, did that really happen? Yes, it did. And that's been wonderful. That kind of, because often, as sometimes with Black parents, we don't sometimes tell a lot of our pain because it's too painful. Understandable. We want to protect our children, but to have those kind of conversations, I think for me was one of the wonderful best things about the whole thing. The people sharing things, just like Nancy did just now, and whatever. It's very important we have these kind of conversations, because it's one, we heal, and two, we fix things. So that was wonderful. That was wonderful.
Hi, Nancy Green again. I wanted to find out from you, how difficult was it to bring these projects into fruition, especially given the scope and the similarities of some of the things that have happened? So I wanted to know what were like some obstacles, and how did you overcome those in bringing these projects forward?
You mean, well, none through the BBC, which was, it takes to get so much done in one's life to get someone to say yes. So that it took a long time, but that wasn't a problem. It was more to do, myself and James Rogan, who co-wrote, directed with me, was fantastic as a researcher. I think it was the research. I think that was it, and also it was just painful. The most difficult thing was the pain, and that's so interesting, because when I had came up with the idea, obviously I in Alex Wheatle, one of the movies in Small Axe, I touched on New Crossfire, but I couldn't make a narrative film out of it. I didn't want to. I knew in my mind that I want to touch on it, but it had to be a documentary or some kind of investigative film, because it needed to be sort of resurrected. It needed to be sort of excavated with care. And the only way I think I could have done that was to bring the unfortunate survivors and victims of that fire to be involved with the actual process of making a film. That for me was the only way of actually doing this story as such, or telling this unfortunate part of our recent history, was in collaboration with the people who survived the fire and the next of kin. So that was the most difficult thing, working with them in a way, just emotionally. It was an honor to do so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure.
My question is this about the police. Today, have they changed their tactics or their attitudes or anything about the way they treat Blacks there in London? Has that changed? Is it more peace for Blacks now with the police and Blacks at that there right now?
Well, I think similar to the United States, no. I think no is the answer there. Similar to the United States, there's a mistrust, of course. And in the documentary Uprising, you obviously when one of the black policemen, who was eyes and ears at that time, is seeing this guy putting a fascist, button in his jacket. He just tells you, the mentality that people were free enough to do that, even back then. It's a very difficult thing. I mean, there's the authorities and black people all over the world in France. It's terrible. It's terrible, terrible. The assaults, it's absolutely terrible. All over Europe and look at South America. They're shooting people in the streets. They're shooting people dead. So there's George Floyd. God rest his soul. But the only it's like, look at Brazil. Brazil has never had a civil rights, has never had a civil rights amendment, never. And it's one of those things where it's very hard to sort of to deal with, because you rely on the law to be the law, and when the law is an institution that you don't even trust, well, I don't know what to say really. We're in a difficult situation. I'm hoping that things change, obviously.
Yeah, so do I. Again, thank you very much. And I never really heard a director talk about the pain of shooting, but I hope you did get joy when you finish your projects. So thank you very much.
Very kind, sir.
While you were shooting Small Axe, did you knew that you want to do these documentaries? Because I can see some correlation in Small Axe with your take with the New Cross House Party. Is the same idea that you have, or it's a different point of view that you have from?
Well, yeah, I think I think you're talking about Lovers Rock, the house party. Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different viewpoint, because 99% of those parties were fantastic. They were wonderful. Yeah. They were like, people falling in love, listening to music, being free, young people dressing up to the nines, looking sweet, looking smart, good food, good drink, ladies, guys, music. So it was wonderful. Unfortunately, there was this party in New Cross which didn't turn out that way, and that was obviously different to what happened the majority of time. So no, but in some ways, yes. I say no, but in some ways, you can obviously compare what could have happened, what could have been, and unfortunately, what was to be.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I wanted to follow up on your response to Al, because, there's this myth in the world that racism only exists in one sector of the world. And, I wanted you to talk about the importance of these documentaries and why it's so necessary to help. It's almost like you have to force the rest of the world to confront the sins of racism and how they have spread not only just currently today, because we have the media blasting it out, but to also showcase that even though they think we've come so far, it's really the same issues that recycle themselves through different generations.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've answered the question. You've asked and answered the question. I'll just try to add to it. That's all. Nothing much more I could say about that. I think, we have to be sort of aware of what's happening around us. I just feel that this sort of, I think we're only going to sort of deal with all this stuff is when we sort of coordinate, not just nationally, but internationally. When people are having all these connections from all over the world and having some sort of real power, a real kind of movement. I mean, I think George Floyd, God rest his soul, that incident did a lot, but for how long? I mean, and also, why does another black man have to die in the most horrendous manner? But also, it wasn't just that, because there were black people, men and women dying way before that as well, but it was the pandemic which focused all of our attention on this. It took the whole world to stop, okay? It took the whole world to stop, and a black man dying for 9.5, being murdered in the most gruesome fashion for 9.5 minutes. Could you imagine that? How much we have to pay just to make a baby step? I don't even know what to say really. I mean, we have to sort of we just have to keep on. There's no other way. There's no other reason. There's nothing more we can do but carry on, basically. But it took all of that to make a baby step. And then we know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're going to go backwards. But we have to make hay while it's high. While the grass is high, we've got to make hay. I'm going on a bit. Please, next question. Sorry, I got lost in my frustration.
Oh, no worries. I'm curious. You referenced a little bit earlier about how 12 years a slave has kind of, changed your career, amplified your voice in a way.
It's not my career. I don't do careers. It didn't change my career. I think it changed a lot of things. It's not my career. It's just I think it's just unfortunately money. Of course you could talk about it.
I mean outwardly, not inwardly.
Excuse me?
But I said I mean outwardly, not inwardly. Like what others will accept in your career or will support. Money is an issue.
What support? How are people supporting me?
That's what I mean. I don't
listen. No, yeah, well, okay, well.
But I'm curious, since you do bring it up, I'm curious, like, where are you going next? In your narrative, and will you stay in the documentary world? Will you stay in the narrative world? Are we expecting a series? I'm just curious as to what will come next.
I don't know. I make art as well, so I don't know. Listen, I'm fortunate that I could do what I do. But for me, what's so sort of recently, what's been so blessed for me is that I could do these, say, documentaries and do these films, which bring attention to sort of things which need to be brought attention to, things that are being swept underneath the carpet. So that's, I think, I'm just going to continue on the same path. I mean, that's it. I mean, even, without that, I would have done that. I mean, my first film, Hunger, was an IRA hunger striker. So, I didn't need huge respect 12 years later for anyone to stop me from doing anything I wanted. But it's one of those things where, what is it? It's one of those things where you just have. It's almost like Fantasia. You just got to keep on. Does it ever get better? Well, you hope so, but we'll see what happens.
Well, there's an incredible wave right now. Like, there's just some powerful documentaries coming out. AAFCA.
Oh yes, AAFCA. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, and so
way overdue.
So So it's
How
just
long is that documentary? How long is it?
Oh, it's I mean, it goes by quickly. I was so engrossed. I want to say it's an hour and a half, but I think it may be 2 hours because my
I
friend.
saw another. I should stop chatting, but I saw.
Yeah, but no, it's just interesting to me. I'm curious as a filmmaker, turning to this space of documentary, like it's just incredible work. And in some ways, these narratives are even more powerful than film itself. So I'm curious as to the freedom or the creativity that this form has given you.
Well, I think there's things, as far as creativity, I think there's still ways of doing things which can bring it closer to certain things. I think it's not done yet. I think the documentaries, I mean, what for me was so exciting for me was the archive footage and playing with that and you know, with the editors and James. I think the archive footage for me was the most important thing because it brings you right back to that period, but also, you know, things which have been kept in cupboards, covered in dust for 40 years, and these people haven't seen it. The first time we see it since then, and people are shocked, of course. Battle of Lewisham, for example. But anyway, I don't. For me, I good question. I'm interested in finding things within the abstract, as well as the literate, as well as the sort of formal, as well as the sort of figurative as such. I'm also interested in finding, because I'm interested in love as well. Trying to what does that look like? What is it? I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. Just as an artist, as a filmmaker, as musicians have done. You try to do different things with sound, and I want to do different things with the camera. So there you go. I hope that hasn't been too puzzling an answer to your question. Sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. And love is in your work as well.
Very kind of you. Cheers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your artistry and your talent. We are here to support you. And on behalf of
you have to. Thank you. I want to say, can I say thank you to you guys? You always say thank you to me, but I want to say thank you to you guys just for being, diligent and passionate. And, I think it's one of those things where, I can say thank you to you, because what you guys do, without you, we need the black gaze on these films, all these films. We need our perspective on all these films, because sometimes, a lot of the times people don't see what we see, and it has to be said, They see an apple, we see a pear. You know what I mean? But thank you so much, guys. Much love. Thank you much.
You're welcome. Much love.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.